Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul, and I am a nerd, and I want to point your attention to the lower right-hand portion of my screen where you will notice that the time is 1 minute after 1. I think this is a new record for us, at least in the year 2011. As most of you know, we tend to start a little bit late. If it were all up to me, we'd start on time all the time, but Mary Jo is always messing with this or trying to fix that. Sorry, Mary Jo. I just got the eye, the look. The evil eye, as my father used to call it. This, of course, is our, what month is it? September 2011 water cooler, which is our affectionate name for the virtual user group meeting, where we talk about everything tabs 3 in PracticeMaster. Today, we are talking about Odbc, which is a nerd term, but means Open Database Connectivity something. I guess I left a word out, but that's a nerd term too, so we'll just call it access to your data, ways to get at your data in tabs in PracticeMaster and the accounting software for use in places other than tabs or PracticeMaster or the accounting software. And we'll show you what I think is a pretty neat application of that. And Mary Jo is going to talk about renumbering or renaming and combining contacts, which is the new word for related parties. So if you have PracticeMaster and you're used to calling those things related parties, we now call them contacts in version 16. And if you've updated to version 16, you know that one of the things that may happen is you may end up with a couple duplicate contacts. But there are easy ways to fix that, and Mary Jo is going to show them to you. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it all over to Mary Jo, and she can talk about that.
Hello, everybody. I believe most of you have already updated to version 16, and we get what we call our dreaded duplicate contacts. And we want to talk today about why they are there and what it means when we're getting these duplicate contacts, and then how to fix those, and then also how to use this application for other merging of contacts that might not show up on the duplicate contact report. So usually when the conversion is done, it's taking all of our contacts that we have in the system, and of course our clients are now contacts, and it's creating contact records. And during that conversion, you might have some contacts out there that are similar or have the same name but maybe different addresses, and the software doesn't know what to do with that. So rather than delete them or merge them on its own, it creates a duplicate contact, and it will put those duplicates in parentheses. So you might have Travelers Insurance Company, and then you might have Travelers Insurance Company with a little parenthesis with a 1, and then Travelers Insurance Company 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And every time it finds something that is similar like that, it's creating a duplicate contact record. Where you can find that information as to what the system created as a duplicate contact, anything with a parenthesis after it, is in Report Writer. And I'm going to go over here to our Report Writer, and they have provided a report in here that is called the Duplicate Contact Report. And this is a quick way to see what happened during the conversion, what contacts were created that were have the parentheses, and that's what this report will show. When we go in here and we print, now usually what I like to do on this report is I modify it a little bit, and I add the address field, the city, the state, the zip, the phone, just so that you can distinguish between these contacts. So for right now, I'm going to go ahead and just print this, and I'm just going to print it for everything in preview. And this will show me what the system, and I believe in ours we created one here. So we have Federal Credit Union with a parenthesis 1. So I know that there is another Federal Credit Union with no parenthesis out there. And this may be a record that I need to merge together to make one contact, because it could be the same. Or in this instance, maybe I have 5 different Federal Credit Unions all in different cities. Maybe one is in Bay City, one is in Flint, one is in Lansing, and so on. And so they're legitimate. They're not duplicates. They're legitimate contacts that need to be kept in the system as themselves. So, but we don't want to have people go in and try to find things by, parenthesis 1, parenthesis 2, parenthesis 3, because that's not going to make any sense. They're not going to know that that's Bay City or that's Lansing or so on. So to understand how this report works a little bit, you just have to know what it's looking at and what those parentheses mean, and then you can determine how you need to handle those. If it is a legitimate duplicate, it's the same record, the same address, the same phone number. I'm going to show you how to merge those contacts into one. And even if you had 8 different ones that were the same, you can merge them all down to one, or you could have separate individual contacts. So this is where you can start with this report after the first, after you do your version 16 conversion. You can look over this report, and then you can decide which ones need to be merged and which ones don't. Something else that you can do after this, if you want to find other duplicate contacts that weren't, maybe they were already there in the system. Maybe you had a Robert E. Smith and then you just had Robert Smith. Those aren't going to show up on the duplicate contact report necessarily, but you want to still merge those. You can also we have 2 different contact reports. There's a detailed contact report, and then there's a summary. And we just did our summary contact report, the summary contact list. And again, I modified mine a little bit to just include an address, a phone number, just something so I could determine whether it was actually a duplicate or if it was a separate record. So I'm just going to do the summary contact list. We'll print that. And I'm just sorting this by, I'm doing a global sort on the related party key, which is the name. And that way it's going to show up in here, and I can see that I've got Bob Smith, Smith/Bob, Smith Bob E, and then Smith Robert. And all 3 of these are the same record. So this report is going to show me all of those duplicates that are similar like this, as opposed to the parenthesis report. So this is where I could actually see and merge these contacts. And again, I include the address, the city, phone number, just some basic information so I can tell if it's a different address or something like that. So this is another report that could be very helpful for you when it comes time to renaming or merging the contacts. So those are the 2 that I start with. And then once I get that list and I know that I need to go ahead and merge those contacts, I'm going to get out of here. Oops, and of course I went all the way out. Sorry, Paul. Let me get back in here. I think I clicked here. There we go. Thank you. So now that I have that, I'm going to go to my Maintenance tab, and I'm going to go to my Renumber Utilities. And under that Renumber Utilities, we have now a Merge Contacts. Now, before this is a little different than renumbering a contact or renaming a contact. Maybe you had a contact that you had put in there and you had spelled the name wrong or something like that, and that's still renaming a contact. In this case, I have 2 records that are, maybe like I said, the Smith/Bob and then the Smith/Robert. They're the exact same record. I just have 2 of them. I don't want to delete it because it's probably used out there in client records somewhere, and then if you've got that out there, then you have to go delete all of those references to that before you can actually delete the contact. Where in this, when I'm merging them, I'm just creating one contact, and it goes out and it changes that contact on all the client records so that I don't have to go in and delete and rename. So when I go into my merge contacts, you can make your backup. We have a question? Go ahead. Okay. Okay, well, I'm going to continue, and we'll find the question here and answer it here shortly. All right, so I'm going to use my Smith example. So here's Bob. Maybe I want to keep it all as Bob Smith. So he's going to be my first contact. And then my second contact, I'm going to go in and I'm going to change that and merge to Bob E. I just want to refer to him as Bob. So whatever the very first contact is, that's what this one will merge into. Your second contact will go into the first. So remember that this is the one you want to keep is contact 1. Contact 2 will become contact 1. So when I come in here and I see my values, the highlighted green are the fields that I'm going to keep. So here you can see on contact 1, I've got Smith/Bob, and then I got the full name. Over here, I don't have that information in contact 2's value. So if I scroll down, I don't think we have any value in there, Paul. I don't know if our sample here was the best here. But I can just keep that same information. I can highlight a field over on this side if that's what I wanted to keep, and then I can merge them. I'm going to try the other Robert Smith and see if he has any information in there. Let's do Robert. And once I tab, there we go. So now I've got 2 sets of information. So if I want to refer to Robert Smith instead of Bob, I can highlight the Robert Smith, and that will then be the name that will become the contact name. If I want Robert Smith on this field, I can do that, but I want his first name to be Bob. I can highlight whichever side I want, and then that will be what the final fields will be for my new contact number 1. And then again, that will go out and it will change that throughout all of my client records. Anywhere that contact is used, it will be merged with this one. If you have more than one contact, like I had 3 Bob Smiths, you can start with your first 2, and then it reduces it down to 1, and then you can take that one and merge it with that 3rd one, and then you can then end up with 1 client record for Robert Smith. Okay, contact record. Okay, so that's that. Now, one other thing that I wanted to talk about on the contacts is to be careful, because if you do have, in my first, when I first was telling you examples with the First Federal Credit Union, there might be locations that I want to keep separate records. I don't want to merge these. I need 2 separate Federal Credit Union records. So in this case, I can open my Federal Credit Union original record and see that they're at 123 Main Street, Bay City. And then my Federal Credit Union with the parentheses with the 1 is actually 321 Any Street, Flint, Michigan. So when I go into these contact records, I want to distinguish these somehow so a user is going to know which contact record to choose, but I don't want to change the name of my contact because it's still Federal Credit Union. So to do that, when I get into the contact record, I don't want to change the contact ID up here. I want to actually change the, let me find it here. I'm going to need to change, where am I changing this, Paul? Because it's on renumber. I have to rename. I'm sorry, I'm lost here a little bit. Let me go over to rename. I thought I could just do it here, but I'm off too. I know, I'm getting stuck in this.
Now I guess we know what our users feel like.
I know, I just all of a sudden went, wait a minute, that's not there anymore.
There did used to be a rename contact over here in the QuickBooks, and it's
Right.
gone now. And the reason being is because that exclusivity that's necessary, and it's something that isn't to be taken lightly as it used to be. So now we know how our users feel.
I do. So let's go into where that rename is and find that. So under our utilities, well, or under maintenance, there you go. And then we have our rename contact over just right next to where the merge contact is. So we're going to go into the rename, and at this point we want to rename the actual contact ID. And where I wanted to, this is the same as what it used to be. So if this was Federal Credit Union, and I want this 1 to now say Flint, I can take that off and I guess I need to keep the 1 there and make it be, I'm sorry, I've got my controllers. I'm going to change this then to be Flint. So my users will then know that this is the Flint location. So I'm renaming it from Federal Credit Union with the parentheses 1 to Federal Credit Union Flint. I'm going to update. Now, I don't want to update that full name. I do. I'm sorry. I think maybe I should just have Paul take over at this point because I'm not. We want to make sure. Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and say OK. No. I'm sorry. OK. So we're updating the full name, but we are not changing the. We need to change the value, so it's still Federal Credit Union, because the full name is what's going to actually show for the client name or the contact name, and we don't want to change that, but we do want to change the ID that we're searching for it. And I hope that made sense because I just lost myself there for a minute. But so what we're doing is we're taking the old contact ID, Federal Credit Union with the parentheses 1. Changing the contact ID to be Federal Credit Union-Flint. We're updating the full name, but then we're taking the new value and we're taking the Flint off because we still want the contact name to be Federal Credit Union. And then we're going to go ahead and say OK, and we'll go ahead and we will rename it. And now when I get in here and I look at my contacts, and I could also do that with the other one with just the regular Federal Credit Union. I could change that to be Federal Credit Union Bay City, so that would make sense to the user at the other end. But now when I go into my contact list, you can see that on my list, it still says Federal Credit Union Flint, but if I actually look at the contact record, you'll see that the name the formal full name is still Federal Credit Union. But up here when I'm searching, I see that it's Federal Credit Union-Flint. Are there questions on that? Because I know that's a little, I even got a little confused there. So are there any questions there? It's difficult to go from the old way for so long, I understand, and then come into this new way of doing it. So any questions at all? Okay, if you, Paul's reminding me, if you do have our Platinum version of the software, you can come in and use the merge contacts or rename contacts without having to kick everybody out. So if you have a regular version of the software, you would need, this would be an exclusive task, so you would have to go ahead and have everybody log out, and then you could do the merge contacts and the renaming contacts. But with our Platinum version, that is something that you can do while users are still in the system. Either I've thoroughly confused everyone completely and there's no questions, or really understand what I just said. So I'm going to turn it over to Paul, and if there's any other questions, you can send them in. Leanne will get them to me. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm going to talk about getting to our data, and we're going to do that with something called ODBC. There are certain things in tabs and PracticeMaster and the accounting software that it may not be easy to get at through the software. Now, some people have the report writer for General Ledger or the report writer for tabs, and those products have their purpose, but they don't do everything that we need to do, and they aren't the easiest thing to use sometimes. So STI has this thing called the Odbc Drivers, and they're basically something that takes your data and exposes it to any ODBC compliant program. ODBC stands for Open Database Connectivity, very nerd-oriented stuff, but once it's set up, you have access to the raw data in STI, in tabs, in PracticeMaster, in GL or AP or Trust to do just about anything with. And you can do it in any program that's ODBC compliant. And to you, that means you can do it in Excel, you can do it in Access, you can do it in Crystal Reports, and there certainly are other programs that are ODBC compliant. Now, are all of you going to do this? Some of our clients are very nerdy and do use ODBC. Most of them are not. But the point is, if there's something that you need that you're currently jumping through 18 different hoops to get and spending 4 hours to compile this report and this report and this report and this report and then pull them all together somewhere to get this one number, then there's probably a way to get that number instantaneously using ODBC. And therefore, depending on how frequently you're doing it, whether it makes sense for you to learn how to do this yourself or just to pay Mary Jo or myself to do it for you, it's probably in the long run cheaper and more efficient than going through all those motions and jumping through all those hoops every time you need that information. And I'm going to take you to a live client site. Client will be nameless, but nonetheless, we're going to go to a live site, and we're going to take a look at something. We're going to take a look at a PDF that I've kind of scrolled down so that you can't see our client's name and you can't see their client's name and you can't see the primary attorney's name. But what you can see is that on this day, 7/30/07, somebody, this client, made a payment, several actually, well, they were applied as this much, $933,450 to fees, $58.71 to expenses, and $168.96 to advances. Now, we don't see the headings, but this here is where it would say in the client ledger report what statement this was applied to. So if you look here, this says that this was applied to statement 79260. The problem is that's not entirely accurate. What it's really telling you, and I'm going to take you back to our system for just a second and show you what's going on here. What it's really telling you in tabs is that when this payment entry was made, there was an opportunity to specifically apply to a certain statement. So if we go and pull up Scooby-Doo and we say we're going to apply to a certain statement, well, we can't, but if we could, we'd be able to say apply this to that statement. The problem is if the payment were more than that statement, it would go ahead and apply the excess to other statements, but this is just the field that shows which statement we specifically said to apply to. So if I go back to my client's site and take a look at this ledger record, when you have this filled in, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only statement that that was applied to. What it means instead is that that is the statement that it was specified to apply to in the payment entry. And that's a problem. It was a big problem for one of the ladies or several of the ladies in the billing department at this client site, because they would look and say, well, we know that that didn't really get applied that way, and we need to know how it was applied. I won't go into why. It has to do with fees that are challenged by an insurance company and whether or not you're going to just write them off or if you're going to appeal the challenge, and therefore they didn't want to just write them off, but they needed to know how they were applied. Bottom line, they needed to know how this was applied. So I wrote this, which is a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet where you simply plug in the client number, and as soon as you do that, it instantly produces this list. And what you'll see here is that although there were 3 payments made on the 30th for this particular client, the fees were actually broken down between these 2 statements here and here. And I can't remember whether 03 or 13 is expenses. I think 03 is advances and 13 is expenses, but that's beside the point. Either the expenses or advances were also broken down between 2 statements. So what I did, or what I was able to do by using the Odbc drivers, was to go in and actually access the raw data. It took me about 20 to 30 minutes to figure out how to do it, and maybe about another 20 minutes to talk with some people at STI to make sure that I was figuring out the right thing, and maybe another 10 minutes to play with it. But in an hour's time, I put together a report that now when these 2 ladies in the billing department have questions on how payments 4 years ago were applied, they simply plug in the client number and they will see all the payments broken down not only by how they were entered, but how they were then subdivided by the software, something that you cannot see over here. You'll notice for 730, I only have 3 payments, and then we have a statement. 3 payments for 730, and yet when you go over to my spreadsheet, you'll see that there are 5 entries because we're looking at it on an allocation level rather than a payment level. So in other words, this payment over here that shows as a fee payment of 9334.50 was actually applied. 6986 was applied to statement 60607, and 2,348.50 was applied to 67005. Now, if you want to know how you have access to the data before you invest in getting the Odbc drivers or having us install them or having us play with them, one thing that you can do is you can go into Help in Tabs or in PracticeMaster. I'm going to get out of this payment screen. And I'm just going to go into Help and Help Topics, and I'm look at that. I don't have help in this version of the system. Boy, who installed this? Whoever their dealer is. No, that's not going to work. It will if I do this, though. I'm just going to jump into our live system just so I can go into Help. Oops. And all my alarms are going to pop up. So you'll have to ignore those. God knows I do. And I'm going to go over to Tabs because I think we started talking about tabs. I want to stay in Tabs. And that didn't work because I have this other version of Tabs running, so I'll do it this way. And there we go, a separate copy of Tabs. And now I can go into Help. Finally. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Index, this Index tab, and I'm going to type Odbc. Now, warning, this is not for the nerdy, or not for the non-nerdy. But I'm going to go into Overview, and what I'm looking for is, my gosh, they've changed Odbc. So Mary Jo went to something the way she thought it was in 15, and now I'm going to something the way I thought it was in 15. ODBC over how to contents. And now we have dead silence. Okay, I'm going to go into tabs then and see if I'm missing something here.
I'll be Paul for a minute. Does anybody know any good lawyer jokes?
Oh, I got Bill with a question. He might have a lawyer joke.
Yeah, Bill's always got a lawyer joke.
I have a question while we're waiting. Bill would like to know if there's any estimate about when the rest of them might get version 16.
Yes. Okay, I'll answer that question, and then I'll do my song and dance to get around the fact that I can't find what I'm looking for. We originally told people, we had a conversation with a lot of you about version 16, what to expect, when to expect it. I sent you links to the detail what's new list, things like that. At the time, I was telling people that we thought that it would all be to everyone by the middle of fall. I now know that STI has pushed that back to by the end of the year. Now, I also know that STI is shipping these out in reverse area code number order. So I don't know. I know that Bill's from the area code 419. I don't know if that means it's going to be there soon. I don't really know how 419 falls in with all the other clients and what their area codes are. But I do not know that STI has pushed that request back to the end of the year as opposed to the middle of fall. Well, frankly, we're at the beginning of fall, so we're almost in the middle of fall as it is. The other thing to remember is if you have some reason that you really want to be in version 16 now, you can shoot me a quick email or give me a phone call and let me know, and I will let Bruce know, who's the product manager at STI, and he'll get you on the list to get it in the next batch that goes out. They were originally shipping those out every week. They're still shipping them out in the same quantity, if you will, but I think they're shipping them out more of every 2 to 3 weeks, just in a larger quantity. So getting on that list doesn't mean you'll have it within a week, because they are shipping them by regular mail, and because they have now gone to a 2 to 3 week distribution with higher quantity. If you need it right away for a $25 handling fee, you can call sales, or I can call sales on your behalf, and they can ship it to you $25 plus whatever the appropriate shipping charge is. So you could conceivably have it tomorrow if you wanted to pay the rate for next day or shipping. So keep that in mind. Now, I was going to go into help and show you how to get to a list of the data files that are in all the programs. You can go into tabs and search for ODBC. You can go into PracticeMaster and search for ODBC, and there should be a data file listing. Why it's not there, I don't know. I was at a client's, in fact, I wrote this report that I just showed you for that client a couple of weeks ago, and it was there then. So something's changed. We have the absolute latest version that we downloaded, I believe, a couple days ago. So something may have happened to the help files, but you should be able to go in, and for each program, by going into help, searching for ODBC, and then choosing the data file listing, or something that sounds like data file listing, I may be remembering it slightly off, and that will give you a list of all the files that you have access to through that program, through tabs, through PracticeMaster, APGL Trust. And if you then click on the link for the file, it will give you a listing of all the fields with any special information about what that field contains. So it's not for the faint of heart. You know, this is not, just go in and say, I want to know how this payment was allocated, and it'll tell you. It has to be installed, has to be configured properly, and then you have to understand how the data hooks together. Another common misconception about ODBC, and this used to be a misconception about the report writer for General Ledger and tabs, having this tool does not mean that you can pull up a report that exists and tweak it just a little bit. If you use ODBC to get information, you are starting from scratch. You are not pulling up an existing report and making a slight modification here or a slight adjustment there. You are starting from scratch and going in and saying, I want this field from this file and this field from this file, and I want them to appear this way. So it's not just a matter of saying, I want the client productivity report, but I want this field over here. It's more a matter of I'm going to recreate the client productivity report, and I'm going to put it in whatever order I want. So again, not for the faint of heart, but certainly something to know about, because it answers a lot of problems for a lot of our clients to have ODBC, and usually it's something that we use as a tool to help answer those questions. Speaking of questions, do we have any more, Leanne?
I do not have any more questions, Paul.
Well, thank you. Okay, we do not have our topics yet for next session, but we will in a couple weeks. Of course, we will send out a reminder to you the Thursday before at about 11 o'clock in the morning or 10 Central. We have a question now.
Yes, Sharon would like to know, is this where invoice information is drawn from?
It could be. There is a file, the client ledger file is the file that holds information on invoices. Well, invoice, are we talking about, well, if you're talking about invoices and accounts payable, that would be coming from the accounts payable system, and there would be an invoices file. If you're talking about the tabs and the invoices that you're sending out, there is that information is also there. So really, for all intents and purposes, everything that's in tabs or AP or GL or Trust or PracticeMaster can be accessed through the Odbc drivers.
Tabs invoices?
Tabs invoices come through the ledger. It's actually the ledger file. We were just looking at an extension of the ledger file when we looked at how those payments were allocated. The ledger file actually contains all statements that are produced, invoices I believe is what Sharon's calling them, and all payments that are entered into the system. They all show up in the ledger file, and the actual allocation, which is what we were looking at in my example, actually shows up in what we call a ledger allocation file. So when I developed that particular spreadsheet, I had to look at both the ledger file and the allocation file. I had to link them together, and I had to pull the appropriate information into the spreadsheet. Any more questions?
Yes, there's one more question. Is ODBC affected by WorldDoc?
It is not. ODBC is merely a way for your spreadsheets and Access databases or Crystal Report Writer or a bunch of other programs to access that data. So it's not really a document, although sometimes it involves a document. But if we were in WorldDocs at this client site, it would merely be the way we got to the spreadsheet to call it up before we actually ran it by typing the client number in. Any more, Leanne?
No, there is not.
Okay. Well, until next month then, everybody have a good afternoon and a good month. And again, if you do have any more questions, you can always send them to paul.purdue, like the school, not the chicken, P-U-R-D-U-E, at attorneycomputersystems.com, or Mary Jo Blum, even though it's pronounced Blum, it's spelled B-L-O-H-M, at Attorney Computer Systems, maryjo.blum at Attorney Computer Systems. Send those questions to her quick, though, because, oh gosh, sometime in about 4 weeks, we're going to have to figure out how to, well, 4 weeks when you come back, Mary Jo. She's holding up 2 fingers. 2 weeks is when she gets married. 4 weeks is when she comes back from her honeymoon, and we have to figure out how to change her email address. So if you're going to ask Mary Jo a question, and you're going to email it, you better ask it within, let's say 3 or 4 weeks, or else you're going to have to call me or email me and find out that she's getting married to a guy named Boyd. So until then, remember, the next time we have this little get-together, Mary Jo won't be Mary Jo Blum. So when we join the meeting next time, we're expecting everybody to have congratulations to Mary Jo Boyd. And so until then, everybody have a good afternoon and a good month, and we'll see you in a month. Thanks much.